Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is where you are. Welcome to our webinar discussing the importance of extending your identity governance solutions to your business critical applications. I'm Tom Venables. I'm the Enterprise Solutions Director for Turnkey Consulting. I'm really happy to be joined by Steve Toole, the Principal Solutions Consultant from SailPoint. Steve's going to share his insights on enterprise IGA, and hopefully I'm going to give some insights on the SAP and business critical applications piece. Steve, good to speak to you again.
Thanks, Tom. Looking forward to the opportunity today.
Yeah, it should be a good one. So to kick us off, I wanted to talk quickly about some of the external factors that influence cybersecurity investment and risk management investment. A number of our customers will be trying to invest in better security. And one of the things that's helping investment is legislative pushes that we're seeing worldwide. Those are unlocking compliance funding for improvements. As you'll be well aware, the SEC new cybersecurity ruling came into place last month, requiring organizations to be able to detect and notify people about breaches. There are similar pushes across Europe, the rest of the world. That's not an exhaustive list on screen, but hopefully you can see there is an impetus to improve those. I see these as really helpful to help practitioners and the engineers that you and I deal with on a day-to-day basis unlock the funding. But with that in mind, how important do you see identity and especially the governance of identity in securing those systems and data for our customers?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's incredibly important. You know, with remote workforces, increased outsourcing, third-party risk, when we take all these things into account, knowing who has access to your systems and what they're able to do within them is a fundamental or foundational security control. The ability to quickly see who has what access to what systems and applications might seem incredibly basic and obvious, but the reality is many organizations struggle with this. One of the elements highlighted by these changes is the element of supply chain risk. The scope of the coverage was changed to include all IT systems that are not only owned, but now used by an organization. And there was a reason for that. This language was deliberately changed to include things like cloud applications and to recognize a shift to a more modern software as a service adoption.
That's a really good point. I remember watching that change with bated breath to see how they were going to land on that. It does bring us nicely onto the topic of cloud solutions for identity as organizations are moving more from the traditional on-premise within the enclave application portfolio and starting to adopt these cloud solutions. How are you at SailPoint responding to that? I know you've got a big push towards your cloud identity solution, but can you speak to some of the benefits that people see from these?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main benefits when you shift to a more modern solution starts with the intelligence that it brings. Now, one of the main goals that we have with Enterprise Identity IGA is providing complete visibility over all users and the access they have within an organization. The way we do this is we literally connect to all the different systems and applications, and we bring them into a central identity platform. From there, we now have a single pane of view of what users have what access in one system. Now, one of the benefits that a modern system provides are the insights and the intelligence once all that data is loaded up. First, we can start with things like outliers. And what we mean by that is, because we're connected to your environment and we start to understand maybe who's in a certain job or a certain department or a cost center, we can start to group those users together. We call those peers at SailPoint. And in order to find the outliers, we can look at those different groups of users and find users that have access that no one else in that peer group has. The idea is to identify it and provide a means to clean that up quickly. After that, recommendations becomes a big deal. And I always like to explain this. A recommendation is really just the opposite of an outlier. Instead of finding access that one of those peer groups has that only a small set has, we're flipping that on its head and we're finding out the access that's common to the peer group. This becomes important for things like when a user wants to request access, right? Imagine an environment where instead of a user having to figure out what they need and finding it through a catalog, we just recommend it saying, hey, everybody in your department or everyone that reports to your manager already has this access. You might need it to do your job. After that, activity data and activity insights becomes a big deal. There was a point in time where just seeing what users had what access was good enough. Well, now in a more modern IGA solution, we want to understand, are these users actually using the access they have? And if they're not, let's start to clean it up. And then lastly, addressing ask a risk before it's provisioned. I'm going to pass over to Tom in a little bit to talk about SailPoint's access risk management solution. This provides the ability to provide out-of-the-box rule sets for SAP. The idea is we never want people to get these combinations of access at the same time. Well, being able to take that risk analysis in place before we set someone's access is what we mean here.
Yes, the role mining elements, the understanding what your commonalities of access are, really interesting because it's something I see customers struggle with is they had a plan when they implemented, but 10 years, 15 years of operation, they get that access creep problem. And you're really helping them identify those outliers and anomalous behaviors. So yeah, really cool benefits case there.
Absolutely. And it kind of leads us into the next benefit, frictionless automation. And I love talking about this because on the side, I'm a little bit of a sci-fi nerd, and the movies I like to watch generally take place in like space or the future. And the best way I can describe frictionless automation is when you watch like one of these movies, when someone accesses a door or a computer system that they're allowed to have, it seems like they just open or it lets them in, right? Automatically. But at the same time, if they try to access something that they're not supposed to, right, that's when the alarms start going off and people start getting notified that this person's doing something that they're not supposed to. That's what we mean by frictionless security. Your end users should maybe not even know that SailPoint or your identity IGA system exists until there's a need for itself to show itself. And let's think about that, how that relates to a modern enterprise. Environments are dynamic. They're always changing. There's new applications coming on board, different types of users. All of those things are normal, but we need a dynamic solution to help manage it, right? We're done with the days where we just set someone's access up and we forget about it. We need a system that can dynamically change users' access based on changes in the environment. The way we're able to do that is through automating the creation of provisioning policies. This is a perfect use case for AI and ML. I always joke with my customers, setting up provisioning for an application is easy. Any company can come in and connect to a system and create accounts and add access. What's really challenging is knowing what to provision and when to provision it. And that is a perfect use case for AI and ML. Once we load up your environment and we start seeing which users have which access, let us start figuring out the patterns of access that people need. The idea here is to speed up the time it takes for access to be provisioned. Now, the way we do that are the benefits that it provides. One, it's going to eliminate manual provisioning efforts, but more importantly, it's going to reduce help desk calls and costs. One organization that I worked for, the average help desk call was $75, meaning every time you called the help desk, it cost $75 for them to take that problem and fix it. Well, you're going to start to see in a couple slides by us reducing the amount of help desk calls through provisioning and things like password reset that I'll talk in a little bit. You could start to see a major drop, one, in the cost that it takes to run a help desk, but also the average call that it cost to take care of. After that, low code, no code workflows. There was a time where in order to build automation or build a workflow for an environment, it took someone with development experience, right? A programmer, someone that understood a coding language. Well, we saw that as as a way that really hindered people from being able to get the most out of the solution. Now we offer low code, no code workflow. It's much more drag and drop, point and click, more designed for a business analyst, not necessarily a computer scientist.
Yeah, I like the idea of moving that to being a master data challenge rather than a coding challenge because it becomes easier configuration, easier for the organization to understand and align across solutions as well.
Absolutely. After that, integration becomes a really big deal. I think we can all agree an identity solution is only as powerful as all the applications and the processes that it's connected to. At SailPoint, we offer hundreds of out-of-the-box connectors to quickly integrate with the different applications in your environment. It allows us to centralize access, controls, and policies in one place. In terms of your end users, we want to make identity as easy as possible. We recognize that companies have investment in Slack or Microsoft Teams, and sometimes even ITSM solutions like ServiceNow. The whole point is, if someone's in Slack or Teams all day long, why are we going to make them come to SailPoint or any other interface to request and approve access? We can offer that right through those collaboration tools. Same thing with ServiceNow. Rather than, if a company has a major investment in ServiceNow, and this is where their users go to request access, why would we make all of them shift to another application or learn another interface just to perform the same functionality? Well, we offer integrations with these platforms so users can request access and then get the benefits of SailPoint provisioning the access in the background. Lastly, there's going to be a point in time where you want other solutions to call SailPoint or call your identity security platform. Sometimes I think of like behavioral analytics tools, right? If they were to see something going on or a user doing something that's out of normal that they're not supposed to, wouldn't it be nice to be able to call your identity system to disable that account or launch an investigation or review that user's access? That's what we mean by this. SailPoint offers a robust set of APIs to allow other applications and systems to call us to do things when the time's appropriate.
Yeah, it's a really important part of any sort of risk management discussion is controls which are difficult to operate or hinder the process won't be adopted. So making it easy to use and to integrate those solutions, as you said, it should be invisible to the end user, right?
Absolutely. And to kind of just keep going down the line, those things that I described are important, but at the end of the day, it's about taking those new features, those no more modern technologies, and it's about return on investment for the organizations that use us. What you're seeing here are different statistics of companies that are using SailPoint and the benefits that they're seeing or gaining out of the solution. On the top left, you see like access certifications. Well, without a modern solution, these can be incredibly labor intensive and resource intensive to get one of these done. You can see sometimes it takes a full year because that's literally how long it takes for companies to set these up and the drop that SailPoint can offer. Next to that, you see users getting access and us deprovisioning access. Instead of taking hours, days, weeks, and then you see on the right months to get someone's access shut off or turned on, you can see a major drop because we have automation to help out with this. It leads to a more productive workforce, as well as reduced risk by turning off access for users that no longer work there. The second line I absolutely love, self-service access requests and password management. These are two of the most common help desk calls that happen. Being able to request additional access, unlocking or resetting your password if something were to happen. Well, if we're able to push that off to your end users and no longer call the help desk, you can see a major drop on those calls. More importantly, a big cost savings in terms of the average cost to fix a help desk call.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I like IGA as part of the portfolio of sort of cybersecurity controls. There is a true return on investment from these solutions. Not everything in the security portfolio can demonstrate such a clear return. And it helps us fight the perception that security is always a cost center to the business. We can actually achieve these efficiency savings. That sort of brings me on to a question that I have. Because obviously you're talking about service desk, you're talking about risk reduction. There's a few key stakeholders in there. When you're engaging with your customers, who are your primary stakeholders? Do you find yourself talking to CISOs or IT service desk owners? Who are you speaking to primarily?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a lot of different folks, and there's a reason for that. Is because identity touches so many different things within an organization. Let's face it, right? When the economy tightens up, like it recently did, getting funding can be hard, it can be challenging, right? We need to be able to prove return on investment, and efficiencies are incredibly important. A great way to fight that is through automation and through a tool like SailPoint.
Yeah, and those efficiencies, they help us build a business case to better secure the identity. It's not just about efficiencies, though. There's a risk reduction there. You mentioned bringing leaver accounts out. Any day a dormant leaver account is active, it's a risk for the organization that an attacker can misuse, right?
Exactly. It is not just about efficiencies. Risk reduction is a big deal as well. And with that agenda of risk reduction in mind, I wanted to pivot a little to the business critical applications. And Tom, as an SAP expert, can you speak to how important these systems are to an organization which use them?
Absolutely, yeah. SAP is often perceived as just a finance system if you haven't spent 20 years speaking Japanese like I have. But it actually runs almost everything that businesses do, from ordering supply chain stock to feed into a manufacturing process, paying payroll, paying suppliers, managing your sales efforts. With all of that in mind, for a typical SAP customer, it might be as much as 90% of the revenue generating activity flows through their SAP system. And that means that they get a very different perspective on risk to the IT organization, who might look at their IT estate and say, well, it's only 10% of my endpoints or my servers, or, particularly relevant for identity, 10% of my user base are on SAP. But that doesn't change the risk profile to the business. And actually, a CISO or an IT service desk manager and an SAP application owner, who might be somebody like the CFO or the chief risk officer, they have a shared responsibility to secure those critical applications, but they don't necessarily talk in the way that we need to secure that funding. So that 90% number is also interesting because I was attending an SAP call the other day, and they estimate that 90% of global revenue touches an SAP system every day. So it's incredibly important. When it's whether it's securing your procurement, supply chain, payroll, finance operations, or sales, the controls and identity governance are applied to the SAP system becomes a much higher priority.
So can you talk to how does ARM compare to other access governance solutions for SAP?
ARM is I really like it. It's got a few key benefits compared to some of the other solutions that operate in that space, and there's half a dozen or so that it's going up against on any given day. The key one is that you have accelerated time to value over competing solutions. Because it's a cloud-based solution, it's got a very small footprint on the customer estate. There's a connector deployed that takes a few minutes to install, as long as you've got your architecture in place. And you can have it deployed and actually delivering valuable content to the business and IT organizations in days, not months. And that's a real key value differentiator. A simple connector is deployed and all the analytics are handled in the cloud. So it's much quicker than a lot of the competing products that are installed within the SAP estate and have to follow its transport and deployment paths. But the other key difference is the way it reports the information to the community who are using it. A lot of its competitors, you need to have been securing systems in SAP for 10, 15 years to understand the output. But with ARM, as you can see on screen, one click from those dashboards brings you into a screen like this. And even if you've not been working in SAP for a while, you can quickly see that somebody's got the ability towards the bottom here to make a payment and process a vendor invoice. They can hide payments with journals. So you don't need to be a business process specialist or an SAP expert to understand the output and to get to that output quickly. So that time to value is really accelerated, but also the business adoption of these reports is accelerated, because you can put this information in the hands of a business process owner who doesn't speak security, doesn't necessarily know the difference between an entitlement and an authorization and a role and all the other terminology that we use. So putting that risk exposure information into the hands of the business users who can quickly see not only who has access, but also whether or not they're using that access.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. Does knowing who's using their access help with managing risk?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've done remediation projects where we've installed the tooling, and just by getting rid of unused access that is allocated to users, we see an 80% risk reduction. You can see on the dashboard here that the red and orange, which are the used and partially used, are only about 50% of the access allocated. So we could have a 50% reduction in risk just by cleaning up unused access. Um, these dashboards continue to be interactive, so you can focus in just on what's being used, and you can filter out a lot of the noise that all the unused access presents in traditional risk reporting scenarios. So you can really drill in and have a much more focused approach to your remediation.
Yeah, and you keep referring to the business, but often access governance is seen as an IT problem. A lot of times it's managed by service desks, application support teams. How important is it to be able to bring the business into the discussions around access risk?
Really important. I'm sure you see the same thing on the enterprise IGA side, where you're bringing this across multiple systems. But it's the businesses, the users of the IT applications that need to be able to do their jobs. But most IT users aren't sitting there processing invoices. They don't have the same level of understanding about the processes that are being operated. So they always need the support of business subject matter experts or process owners to define what the entitlements and the authorizations that they need to do their job are. IT is simply responding to that request. So when they provision entitlements, they're helping the business to understand the risks. So if a process owner says, I need role A and role B, entitlement A, entitlement B, we can start to say, well, that is going to present a risk to the system because this person can execute both sides of a process which they could use to commit fraud, or a malicious actor, if they got access to that identity, could use. It's about shared ownership and the risks and remediations which need to be applied.
Yeah. And so you're saying that with ARM and integrated with a cloud identity allows customers to manage risks associated with the access to these business critical systems. But I wanted to ask, is that the only detective control?
Historically, people would treat it as a detective control. The advantage of something like ARM is you have APIs where you can plug in simulations, as you can see on screen here. So I can take a look at what if I gave this access to this user. So it becomes a preventative control. What we see is that we often refer to the remediation phase as a get clean phase, cleaning up mess that's been applied over multiple years. But this simulation allows us to move into that preventative control, stay clean mode of operation. So provisioning a new or changed user, we get early insight into any risks which are going to be presented, and those can be mitigated by the business before and take action against that element of provisioning before it becomes real.
Yeah, and from what we're seeing, I can understand the risks which are being identified even without being fluent in SAP and entitlements and all those things that are in there, which can help me build entitlements with risk in mind, which is obviously helpful. Are there any other features which you wanted to talk about with our audience, or what you might find that they would think useful?
Yeah, I mean, I could go into an hour-long demo and showcase all of the features, but I think one of the key ones from a risk reduction perspective is the ability to manage privileged access to the system. A lot of customers out there will be operating PAM controls in solutions that are targeting the operating system, the databases, and the infrastructure. What emergency access management in ARM allows you to do is to extend your PAM controls to the application layer. So if somebody does need access to sensitive functionality, they need to open a system for changes. We can extend that control in a way that some competing PAM solutions can't. Controlling who can access the application with those elevated privileges is one of the largest risk reductions that can be applied. EAM allows you to ensure that there is an approval, a review, and a temporary allocation of privileged access to the SAP application. And it's all in a single auditable system. So your controls execution around elevated and privileged account access is streamlined massively.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's useful to know that we can not only provision to SAP from our identity solutions, but we can also extend access governance to a landscape which can be difficult to understand and which clearly represents an important component of the landscape to secure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always appreciate you bringing the enterprise context of identity governance across the estate and the integration points that benefit the organizations. I'm aware that we're almost out of time. So I would like to share our contact details. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Steve. All that remains, Steve, thanks once again for your time. And I encourage anyone to reach out.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Tom.
Thank you.